Fortnite Battle Royale. What a very confusing game. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Stonesy Reads. Where today we're going to go from 141 to 160. There will only be a few more episodes after this one. And then, we'll be good. With FNAF Fright's number 4, Step Closer. Which I think is actually one of the longer books. I think this one's longer than the last one. But that's okay. So, yeah, let's begin. Her mom's blankets were hung on walls, which Susie thought was weird, but her mom liked making them. And according to her mom, the pretty blankets paid the bills, which was a good thing because Dad wasn't here anymore. Susie didn't understand why he left, but he was gone. Was that a bad thing? Susie wrapped her arms around her knees. No, she didn't think so. She thought it was something else. She wondered if she could try to hug her mom. Probably not. Her mom didn't like to be hugged when she cried. Susie just stood there, hoping her mom would stop so they could talk. But her mom didn't stop crying. She just pushed away from the door jamb and walked down the silent hallway. Samantha was outside, wandering around on the front lawn blowing bubbles. Anyone watching her would think she was having fun, but Susie knew Samantha didn't blow bubbles for fun. She did it to study air currents. Susie knew better than to ask if she could blow bubbles too. Samantha would say no. It would mess up her research. But Susie wanted to be near her sister. So she wandered to Oliver, patted him on the rough, moist trunk, and ducked inside the faded black tire swing. Pushing off from the ground, she got a swing going, and threw her head back to look up at the gloomy sky with spin swung in a lazy circle. And the evening air was cold, but not too cold. It had the false scent that Susie had heard others describe as crisp. She didn't know what crisp smelled like, but she thought the fall air was two-sided smell, tart and musky at the same time. And of course, fall air around her house still had that other smell she didn't like. Susie closed her eyes, refreshed her spin. She could hear Samantha trotting around the yard. Oliver's dried leaves crackled under her feet. When Susie heard voices, she opened her eyes and turned so she could see the sidewalk. Long ago, their house was a farmhouse that sat in the middle of lots of land. But as years went by, and all those great-grandmas grew and little girls to old women to family to sell part of the land, so said Susie's mom. Eventually, Susie's grandma sold the last of the land and became a developer. The developer built a big subdivision around the house. The new houses were built to look like the old farmhouse. Susie's mom said they were all Victorian, but the new houses didn't have personality like of the old house. The new ones were all serious colors like gray and tan and cream. Susie's house had a lot of fun colors. Mainly it was yellow, but the trim, and there was a lot of trim, was purple, blue, pink, gray, orange, and white. Susie's home called the trim gingerbread. Because no sense to Susie because the trim wasn't made of cookies, although she wished it was. Susie always thought it looked like their house was dressed up to go out, and the other houses wore everyday work clothes all the time. The sidewalk in front of the new houses was wide, and it was closer to their house than Susie's mom wanted it to be. Susie didn't mind that. She liked watching people go by, especially with the tire swing. A big laurel hedge along the front of their yard blocked the view of Oliver's lower trunk and the tire swing. Susie liked to stay there and play spy, watching people through the hedge without them knowing she was there. The group going by now was 5 kids in it. She was pretty sure they were in Samantha's class. 3 of the kind, all girls, were riding bikes. The 4th kid, a tall boy, was messing around on a skateboard, and the final one, a smaller boy, was on a scooter. It didn't look like he knew exactly how to use it. Hurry up, Drew, one of the girls snapped to the small boy. He was a blonde. His hair stuck up all over his head. Yeah, one of the other girls said. Both girls had dark hair and wore jeans and blue hoodies. This place is spooky. Susie lowered the tire spring and listened to the kids. Spooky? Did they sense it too? The thing that Susie didn't understand? Hey, Professor, the third girl called out. This girl had reddish hair. Her black leather jacket hung open to show a bright pink shirt underneath. Susie knew Professor was Samantha, but even if the word hadn't been said in a sarcastic tone, Susie knew it was supposed to be an insult. Ever since Samantha started grade school, her classmates made fun of her for being too serious. Susie hated that kids did that, and the first time it happened, she tried to stick up for Samantha. What's wrong with being smart? She yelled at the kid taunting her sister. You're just jealous that she knows more than you. Susie had thought Samantha would appreciate the support, but Samantha got upset. I don't need you to take care of me, she told Susie. I have to stand my own 2 feet. Susie knew Samantha got this expression from her grandma, but she didn't argue, and she never again tried to stop the kids from her teasing.
so didn't speak up when one of the girls called out, "Freak." "Come on, Drew," the boy said on the skateboard boy of the scooter. "I hate passing this house," the leather jacket girl said. "Yeah," one of the other girls agreed, shivering. The girl said, "I used to play with them when I was in kindergarten." She was always serious, she pointed at Samantha. "But she at least would talk to you. Now it's like she shrugged. "I don't know." The kids had passed the house, but Susie turned to watch them, and she kept listening. "Can you really blame her?" the small boy said. "Come on, Drew," the leather jacket girl said. "Let's just get by, huh?" When night came, it dropped on the house like someone up in heaven abruptly threw a black blanket over everything. The girls got ready for bed as usual, and as usual, Samantha didn't protest when Susie got into her bed. She knew Susie hated to sleep alone. Even so, Samantha always slept on her back, and she always slept as far as Susie as possible, especially now. Susie faced the window, even though the window had a shade. It never pulled. Susie's mama said the house should have much light as possible, sunlight or moonlight. Susie liked to lie awake and look at the way the moonlight brought things to life in the room. The eerie glow cast shadows over Samantha's bins, making them look like big mouths trying to gobble the moon. She also liked to look at the stars and name them. Tonight the stars were hiding. Only the faintest gleam of the moon's silver managed to push through the clouds. The only light coming into the room reached dimly in the porch lights over the front and back doors. The room was cold, and the cold bothered Samantha more than it did Susie. So the girls lay under two thick, soft blankets. Susie shoved the blankets away from her mouth. "Are you awake?" Susie asked her sister. She kept her voice at a whisper. Samantha didn't answer. This wasn't unusual. She didn't like talking at night. But that didn't stop Susie. "I keep having a bad feeling like something's wrong," Susie whispered. She didn't wait for a response. "The world smells funny," she told her sister. She twisted up her mouth, trying to describe the smell. "It reminds me of a little when we left leftovers in the container too long, and then Mom tells us to clean them out, and then we had to hold our nose and talk like this." She held her nose and talked in a funny voice that resulted. She giggled at herself. Samantha remained silent. She never thought Susie's funny voice were all that funny, and maybe she was actually asleep. Susie held to Samantha's smooth blue sheets wouldn't make the stressing sound that they made when you shifted into bed. She focused on Samantha's breathing. It was deep and even. Susie pulled her legs tighter and nestled her head further into the pillow. A lot of his leaves weren't right color, and they were not bright enough. Susie breathed, in and out. "And Mom's acting strange, you know?" Samantha didn't respond. Susie sighed. She closed her eyes and tried to go to sleep. Thump. Susie's eyes shot open. She fallen asleep? Did she dream that muffled sound she just heard? She lay perfectly still, listening. Thump, thump, thump. No, she didn't dream it. Someone or something was walking around on the porch. The sound was that of a big foot hitting the wooden boards. Susie sat up, clutched her smooth sheets and Samantha's soft white blankets. She cocked her head and listened closely. That's when she heard the taps between the thumbs. Thump, tap, thump, tap, thump. Susie didn't move, but suddenly Samantha sat up. She immediately swung her legs to the side of the bed, but she didn't stand. She just sat there, her back rigid. "You heard it too?" Susie whispered. Samantha didn't reply. So Susie decided she had to do something on her own. She made herself let go of the covers, and then dropped her legs out of the bed. She ignored the cold air that hit her ankles. She padded out of the room and down the stairs to the kitchen. Susie paused at the island and looked at the pale yellow glimmer creeping through the kitchen window, radiating from the porch light above the back door. The digital clock over the stove glowed red with a dark room. 11:50. The refrigerator hummed, the faucet dripped. It had dripped for quite some time. Susie knew one drip every 10 seconds. She waited through 2 drips while she listened to the continued thump-tap sequence outside the porch. Then the sounds faded to make her think that whatever was making the sound made opposite side of the house. So she went to the back door, took a deep breath, and opened it. Just then, Samantha reached over Susie's shoulders and slammed the door. Susie whirled toward her sister. Samantha's eyes were huge. Her lips were compressed. For the first time she said goodnight to her mom, Samantha spoke. "There's nothing out there. Back to bed." She turned and marched out of the kitchen, making abundantly clear that Susie wasn't supposed to follow her. Jeannie's voice was so warm and strong that even though it came through a phone line, it sounded like she was in the room. "You're more than Susie's mom, Patricia," she said. Patricia held the phone to her ear in one hand while she brushed her limp hair with the other. She sat on the edge of the king-size bed. The bed was far too big for her alone, but it ended far small for her and her husband. That's why he had to leave, so they could stop intruding each other's space. Although they had needed all the space they could never clear to her. "And more than Samantha's mom," Jeannie continued. You're you, and you'll find yourself again, eventually." Patricia sighed. Samantha won't stop talking to me, except to order me around. Jeannie laughed. She's her own woman. Patricia wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at that. The idea of her 8-year-old daughter acting like a woman was amusing, but the idea of her daughter being forced to turn into a pint-sized woman was not amusing at all. It will get better, Jeannie said. It always does. Patricia nodded. Even though Jeannie didn't see her, Jeannie knew that she nodded. Patricia and Jeannie had been friends since they were in Samantha's age. Together they'd gone through school, college, and grad school, both in art. When Patricia married Hayden, Jeannie was her maid of honor, and when Patricia had her girls, Jeannie became their godmother. Jeannie was like the sister Patricia never had. I don't know what I'm doing this right, Patricia said. There is no right, Jeannie said. That made everything harder somehow. I wish. She stopped and froze. What did she just hear? Did something come from outside or inside? You there? Jeannie asked. Patricia stayed silent, listening. Patricia? Patricia shook her head. She was imagining things. She blew out air. I'm here. Susie had followed her sister back to bed, but now she was creeping away. This time, she paused for a second outside her mom's room. She's probably on the phone with Jeannie. They've talked pretty much every day, either in person or over the phone. If Jeannie was in town, she'd come by, but if she traveled a lot for her job, so her job was buying art for people. Susie had thought it sounded like a very fun job. Susie lurked in the hallway, hoping to hear her mom laugh, but the laugh never came. Instead, the footsteps sounded then. Thub, tap, thub, tap. Susie put her shoulders back and turned toward the top of the stairs. Descending slowly, pausing on each step, Susie looked over the top of a wax oak banister and panned a window at the front of the house. Sheer curtains blurred the outline of the porch rails, and beyond them, Oliver's solid presence. She stood like a tireless guard in the middle of the front yard, but the sheer curtains didn't block the shape of Susie stalking past the windows of the front porch. The shape was too big to hide. All the curtains could do was distort it and disguise what it was. The shape moved slowly, deliberately, launching in sync with the sounds of its studs. Thud, tap, thud, tap. As it moved, its head swiveled. Every few steps, Susie could see the reflection of sharp eyes as they searched the interior of the house. Every time those eyes looked her way, Susie turned into stone, willing herself to disappear into the ground. Even though she wanted to hide, Susie didn't go back to bed. She couldn't. She knew that. So she continued down the stairs, managing one step for every 6 footsteps she heard on the front porch. By the time she reached the first floor, the shape was passing the last of the tall windows on the left side of the house. Susie tiptoed ahead of it. Ducking into what used to be her dad's office, she watched the shape outside pass the office window and head toward the kitchen side of the house. Hesitating only a moment in the empty room lined with the dusty shelves, Susie pushed off the door jamb and went into the kitchen for a second time at the night. She crouched behind the island and the shape passed through the yellow light outside the kitchen window. Once it had moved on, heading back toward the front of the house, Susie stood. She clenched her fists and released them. Then she went to the front door. The front door was as old as the house, built of thick wood and stained so many times the door always wanted to stick. When you tried to open it, the carved front door reminded Susie the time wouldn't be stopped, no matter how much you wanted it to be. The footsteps paused. Susie listened. She heard nothing at all. She reached for the front doorknob and she opened the door. She opened the door in increments, 2 inches, 6 inches, a foot. She took a deep breath, stepped around the door, and looked up. She waited, like she always did, every night, frightening, familiar, persistent. Susie didn't cringe or tremble or jump back, even though it would have been reasonable for her to do any of those things. Instead, she said, "It's time to go back already?" Chica held out her yellow hand. Her mouth didn't move. Susie knew Chica wouldn't answer, because Chica didn't talk to her. Susie turned away from the man-sized animatronic chick standing in front of her. She looked back up at the stairs, longing. But longing didn't do any good. Susie looked back at the animatronic chick, ignoring the gaping metal mouth with all the teeth. Susie focused on Chica's bright yellow body and big white bib hanging around Chica's neck, one that said, "Let's eat." And then she looked at the cupcake Chica held. Susie thought the cupcake was scarier than Chica. It had eyes, 2 buck teeth, and a candle stood up straight from the middle of it. Susie didn't know what the candle was for. 1 day, 1 year, 1 child? Letting Chica take her hand, Susie walked away from her house. Every step made her feel less like herself. By the time she passed Oliver's still falling trees, she was lost. Patricia stared through the open front door of the oak tree, and was stopping its leaves all over the front lawn. She had a feeling she just missed something important. Several minutes later, she heard the sound again. This time, she couldn't talk herself out of it. She left her bedroom and come down into the hallway. When she looked down the stairs, the front door was standing wide open. Heart racing, she ran to Samantha's room and peered in. One glance slowed her heart rate. Okay, her worst nightmare wasn't playing out. But why was the door open? Grabbing the pair of knitting needles and holding it in front of her like it was a knife, she crept through the house, checking for an intruder. There was nothing. Patricia closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and pressed her hands against the door, pushing all of her strength as she would shove away a reality, maybe pressing it into some other form. Pulling her hands back abruptly, sucked in her breath, there was something she hadn't considered. What if someone came through the still open door while she searched the house? She turned and ran up the stairs to Samantha's room, nearly collapsed in relief. Everything was okay. Samantha was awake. She sat up in bed, the covers pulled up to her neck, her fists clenched and her knuckles stark white. Tears made her eyes sparkle in the faint light from her bedside lamp. Patricia sat down next to her daughter. She wanted to pull Samantha into a tight hug, a never-let-you-go hug, but Samantha wouldn't like that. She never tolerated she was slightest touch. So Patricia simply placed a hand on Samantha's shoulder. Before she did, I know you miss her. I miss her too. Samantha blinked and 2 tears escaped her eyes, meandering down her lean cheeks. She didn't bother to wipe them away. Patricia sat next to Samantha for a long time, but neither mother or daughter spoke again. Finally, Patricia stood, kissed the top of the daughter's head, and returned to her huge bed. Samantha waited for her mother to leave now before she moved. She lay on her back, waiting for the light and shadow play cat and mouse on her ceiling. If Susie was here, she'd make up some story about the shadows and light, about them fighting each other, dancing or something. She was always making up things. Susie got that from her dad. Even though her mom wasn't an artist, their dad was the one who went to work in a suit and did all the stuff for business that neither Samantha nor Susie understand. She was the one who loved stories. In the free time, he was always reading a book or watching a movie. He could make up a good stories, too. When he was home, the girls had always had an original story at bedtime. Their mom wouldn't even try to make up a story. I'll read you a story instead, she would say when their dad was out of town. But now she didn't any. Instead, she just asked what book they was reading tonight. One of the stories their dad made up about a little boy who had a secret place in a hidden room in his house. From that room, he was able to solve all his problems, no matter what they were. He told hundreds of these stories, making up a new problem for the boy to solve each time. Susie was convinced these stories meant there was a secret room in their house, but they was always asking their dad about it. His answer was always the same. He'd pretend to zip his lips shut and throw away an invisible key. Susie thought of the way the secret room was in her dad's office, but in the back of the house. Samantha thought it was just a story. And she was glad the office was always locked so Susie couldn't talk her into getting in trouble and looking for a secret room. Now the office wasn't locked because their dad was gone, but Susie no longer talked about looking for the secret room. Samantha pressed her lips together, disgusted with herself for thinking about Susie in the stupid secret room. But then she thought about the sounds she heard that night. The one she tried to convince herself she imagined them. That had to be true, because when she looked outside, she never saw anything at all. But lying there alone in silence in the strange halfway land of the night, she couldn't quite convince herself that she'd made it all up. She was pretty sure something had been outside, but what and why? In the brisk late morning air, Patricia Jeannie sat by the side on the porch, swinging padded in the yellow floor cushions. Patricia was aware that, to any passerby, she and Jeannie were part of an idyllic scene, both women wearing wide-brimmed straw hats and hide faces from the sun, to slant into a porch, sip tea, and ward off the fall chill. They probably looked as relaxed as could be. They weren't, or at least Patricia wasn't. Patricia studied her friend. Jeannie was almost her perfect opposite in size and coloring. Whereas Patricia was tall, thin, and dark hair, Jeannie was short, plump, with blonde hair. In spite of these differences, both women used to have quality in common. They both smiled and laughed easily. Now Patricia couldn't do that anymore. So Patricia took a shaky breath. I'm wondering if I should take Samantha to a different counselor, she said, at the cringe of her voice seemed to scar the air. Rhonda is nice, and Samantha likes her. I think, honestly, it's hard to tell. She waved that away a fly. But I talked to Rhonda last week, and she says Samantha's stuck. Samantha's clearly keeping something from herself. When nothing Rhonda is doing will get her to talk. Samantha has always done things in her own way, Jeannie pointed out. She grinned. That child has an opinion about everything. Patricia attempted to smile, but only got halfway there. Remember how she harangued Susie relentlessly about naming that tree? Jeannie gestured at the ancient oak. What's his name? Oliver. Patricia started crying. Jeannie sat her teeth down and took Patricia's hand. I'm sorry, that was insensitive. Patricia wiped her eyes and shook her head. It's been a year. I should... There aren't any shoulds when it comes to losing a child. Isn't that what your counselor told you? Patricia nodded. No rule book. They sipped tea in silence for several minutes. Patricia watched Oliver drop another dozen leaves. The precious night persistent breeze had taken hundreds of Oliver's remaining leaves. He didn't have any left in the gnarled branches. Pretty soon, he needed his scarf. Jeannie patted Patricia's knees. You're thinking about Oliver's scarf? I made Patricia literally ache to think about how 4-year-old Susie would run inside after Oliver dropped his last leaf of the year when she named him. When she returned, she held one of the next scarves Jeannie had knitted for her. Patricia gazed at Oliver and felt like she could see her scene 3 years before unfolding in front of her now. The scene was a little fuzzy in places, but otherwise it was almost real. Her little arms crossed, her brow furrowed. Susie sighed. Well, he'll get cold because he doesn't have leaves. She was dressed in a bright orange jacket. When Susie found out the scarf wasn't big enough for Oliver, he was heartbroken. So Patricia suggested Susie ask her godmother to knit a scarf, specifically for Oliver. Now Jeannie knitted a new scarf for Oliver every year. I've already knitted it, Jeannie whispered. Tears spit down Patricia's cheeks. She was surprised that she was had tears to cry. She was always an anthropomorphizing, Patricia said. I never saw a problem with it. There was no problem with it. She was an empathetic child with a vivid imagination, which is why she was so easily lured. Patricia didn't recognize her own voice. Normally soft, but now as hard as and rough as Oliver's bark. I should have discouraged her flights of fancy. I should have... Stop it, Jeannie shifted her face to Patricia. Not all murdered children were like Susie. You don't know what it would have been like if different. If she had been a different kind of child. You can't stop trying to find reason to blame yourself. Patricia looked down. I hated that place, she whispered. It always seemed creepy to me, but Susie loved it. Jeannie frowned. Are you sure you want to go over this again? I need to. No, you don't. Yes, I do. I can't just forget. Why not? How are you helping Susie by torturing yourself with the details over and over? Patricia wanted to yell at Jeannie to shut up, but she didn't have the energy. Jeannie took both of Patricia's hands. Your daughter was murdered by a serial killer. She was lured to her death in a place where she wouldn't have been safe. There. We've dug it up again. Feel better? Patricia yanked her hands back and started to stand up. Jeannie grabbed her arm and held her in place. Her grip was pinching Patricia's skin. Don't run away, Jeannie shouted. Then she lowered her voice and kept it firm, just shy of scolding. You can't dredge up the past and run from it. If you insist on trotting it out to torture yourself regularly, least you could do is do it head on. If you don't, you'll be running away your whole life. You'll never be able to let go of Susie go. A car zipped by on the road, its engine revving. The smell of exhaust wafted out of the porch. Something about the odor erased Patricia's anger. She was wearing her favorite sweater, the one you knitted for her. Magenta with pink stripes, Jeannie said. She wanted sequins, Patricia said, and you wouldn't let me put any on the sweater. So you put rhinestones on her jeans instead. Jeannie laughed. You really were angry with me. Patricia wiped her eyes. Stupid things to be angry about. Jeannie gently squeezed Patricia's arm and let her go. A breeze curled up on the porch from the yard, and Patricia shivered. Susie watched Samantha learn the rake and scowl at Oliver. It's not his fault, Susie said. He can't help it if his leaves land on the ground if he lets them go. Samantha sighed. Susie tried not to be annoyed. I said I'd do it, she reminded Samantha. Right after they got home from the afternoon, her mom said, maybe you can do a little raking before dinner. Susie said, I'll do it. But before Susie could get the rake, Samantha grabbed it and wouldn't let go. She'd rather do it right and not let doing it someone else do it wrong. Fine, let Samantha rake. Susie would hang out with Oliver. Listening to Rasmus scuff his leg, Susie went around the back of Hyder's truck, away from the road, and hugged him. Oliver smelled smoky and moist, laying the side of her face against the truck. She listened. Sometimes she listened really hard, and then she was sure she could hear him breathing. Hi, Samantha. The greeting came from the sidewalk. Susie peered around Oliver, who was calling out her sister. It was Drew. Huh. So that's an interesting turn of events, huh? So, apparently, Susie is dead. Huh. Susie's dead. So maybe Susie was one of the victims in the original thing, and having Chica like kind of come up, take her away for the night. Maybe she was stuffed in the animatronic suit, and then it was like stuffed in the animatronic suit, and it was like, oh,
well, now she's a ghost of robot. So, like, how in FNAF 3, one of the mini games was like, oh, you have to give them their happiest day. Susie's happiest day was having a family. But they were sad because, you know, something happened. So Susie died to the serial killer, William Afton, and then it was like, well, that sucks. And then bobbity bee, skibbity boo, right? Right. And then it's her ghost, and that's why no one's responding to her, really. And a lot of it could, actually everything in it could be explained, which I think is a really nice touch for a ghost to do it. So, like, her swinging on the tire could be the wind, because they bring it up later. Her laying down next to her sister without her sister ever caring or saying goodnight could just be her kind of being like, well, her waking up and crying is, like, of course, you know, missing her sister. Her going upstairs and back to bed, literally it's explained in, like, a few pages, which is, like, her saying she swears she hears it, but she's just probably talking to herself, like she did when she said, I'll do it, or, like, I need to do it when it came to raking the leaves. So everything's explained, which is really cool. It's rare to see that in books. Or rare to see that at all in stories. The lesson I can give today is letting go is not something easy. It's not something everyone can do, but it's something everyone has to do once in their life. So, if you have to let go of something, don't think of it as a negative, think of it as a new chapter. Even if the chapter doesn't seem pleasant, make it pleasant. Because the more you are sad about that chapter, the more sad it will be, because you're just going to mentally tell yourself it's sad. So, like, next chapter of my life, I'm never going to drink soda again. What I would do is first think it's sad. I could think it's sad that I'm never going to have soda again, and then the entire time be sad like, man, I want soda. Or I can go, this is a great time for me to drink water and then be healthy. This is a new chapter. So instead of being sad about never drinking soda again, I should be happy that I'm drinking water, because at least I'm drinking something, or at least I'm doing something, or at least I'm being healthy for myself. At least I'll be better so that I can help others in the future. That type of like happiness junk, you know? But yeah. Happiness and smiles and rainbows and kitty cats. But yeah. Hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. Be polite, be efficient. Next time we'll read 161 to 180, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.